This is the Innocn 45C1R, and it's kind of ridiculous in a good way. Before I tell you about this beast that came in a 5-foot long box, let me take you back in time a little. When I was a kid, monitor sizes were between 11 inches and 14 inches. I remember coveting a 15-inch NEC multisync, which seemed gargantuan in comparison. My dad took me to his work one weekend, and I saw my first double monitor setup, a huge 17-inch screen and a 12-inch monochrome screen on a CAD workstation. After college, with money from my first professional job, I got the cheapest and worst 19-inch monitor I could get and paired it with the 17-inch monitor. Eventually, I was running 3 flat square 21-inch CRTs on a really big and strong desk. Anyone remember the Parahelia? LCD monitors took me further down the path, with me getting high-resolution 30-inch displays which required dual-link DVI. And my peak monitor era ended with me having 6 43-inch LG 4K monitors, arranged 3 across and 2 high. Clearly, ridiculous. I mean, who doesn't have a home office that looks like NASA Mission Control? Am I right? These days, I'm a dad. I no longer have unlimited space for all of my stuff, and I no longer have the eyesight I had even a couple years ago. That unfortunate occurrence led me to not necessarily focus on the raw resolution of monitors anymore. Because who really cares if you're just going to up the display scaling of your desktop anyway? So if I'm no longer in the market for something like a 5K, 6K, or 8K monitor, what would represent a good productivity selection? What I'm going for here is a workbench productivity monitor appropriate for Homelab use. And I've typically ruled out ultrawide monitors, but that was for 2 reasons. First, they didn't always have the resolution I was looking for, especially when it came to vertical resolution. But as I mentioned, I usually don't have extremely tiny type on the screen anymore. I mean, I don't run a crazy display scaling value, but I no longer fully take advantage of 2160 vertical resolution. Reason 2 was the way Windows handled ultra-wide single monitors. Though for the past couple decades, there have been various utilities that you could use to arrange a single monitor into multiple snappable and scalable areas. Windows 10 finally added some basic support to the OS. None of that worked well for me, so I continued to favor multiple monitors. But this is really where Windows 11 has changed things. I don't love Windows, but it is the most productive operating system for lots of my work and hobby tasks. Windows 11 introduced native snapping and tiling into the display manager. It's useful with my 43-inch monitors, of which I still have 2. But it also makes it to where having a single display is legitimately a good productivity choice now. My current job, and my last one, required that I work on a company-provided laptop. Generally, I hate laptops, unless I'm actually computing on the go. Because of how I had my workspace set up, I bit the bullet and bought a large curved LG widescreen display. It was fine. After all, I was still using the laptop display as a secondary monitor. As nice as that monitor is, the truth is that it's not really wide enough to be a legitimate replacement for large monitors sitting side by side. The continuous viewing surface, on the other hand, is nice most of the time. Today, I have something completely new on my bench. If the LG was widescreen, this is ultra widescreen. It's ridiculous. Came well packed in a box that stood on end, was about 5 feet tall. The box does tell you right away that this is not a typical monitor purchase. It came in at just under 5 feet standing on end, which, as I mentioned, is completely absurd. Innocn did not cheap out on packing materials. The panel is sandwiched in dense molded styrofoam on both sides, and the whole assembly is bagged in a soft foam sleeve. It feels like something you'd expect from a much more expensive display. No rattling around, no corner cuts. Literally. As you might expect, the styrofoam is a bit messy when unboxing the monitor. Inside the box you get the panel, the vertical tube for the stand base, a USB-C cable, a USB upstream cable, an HDMI cable, a DisplayPort cable, a power cable, instructions, and a color calibration report. Yes, a printed calibration report with actual measured values. We'll come back to that. Assembly isn't entirely tool-free, as you join the base components with 3 screws. A quick disconnect latch snaps the monitor onto the base. It's stable, and it doesn't wobble once assembled. This matters quite a bit the wider display you have. The stand gives you some limited tilt and height adjustment, and it swivels left and right. There's no pivot to portrait mode, which is fine. Nobody is rotating a 45-inch ultra-wide to portrait. Well, maybe someone, but nobody is rotating a 45-inch curved ultra-wide to portrait. Nobody. What I don't love is that there is a bit of rotation, like 15 degrees of roll. I don't know why that's there, and I wish you could just lock the stand into a completely level setting. The stand does not give you a particularly wide footprint on your desk. The base is a three-leg design that projects forward. It's reasonably compact for the size of panel, but you will absolutely know it's there. And while it's stable, it's extremely unfriendly for the size of keyboard I like to have. For what it's worth, in general, I don't think included monitor stands are the best move. The angled front feet are too narrow to fit anything useful in between, and while I could fit my old Razer 13 laptop, it was only useful if I didn't need to open the screen. Innocn includes VESA 100 by 100 millimeter mounting holes on the back, which means that if you have a monitor arm rated for the weight, and that's roughly 20 pounds for the panel alone, you can ditch the stand entirely. For a display this wide, a VESA arm that lets you push it back and tilt it properly is genuinely worth considering. The bezel is thin, noticeably thin on three sides, with a slightly thicker bottom chin that houses the branding. The back of the panel has a matte texture plastic finish that photographs well and doesn't collect fingerprints the way glossy backs do. The overall design language is mature and understated. There's no RGB, no aggressive gamer angles, no vents that look like they belong on a concept car. It just looks like a monitor. A big one. I appreciate that. The on-screen display joystick is located on the far right under the bezel. One joystick does everything. You navigate with it, select with it, and back out with it. Once you learn the layout, it's fine, but the first few minutes of hunting for it feel a bit like a rite of passage with the design approach. Considering that my use cases include using this with multiple computers, I really would have appreciated an infrared remote like I have with my LG 43s. The OSD itself is clean and organized. Brightness, contrast, color temperature, HDR toggle, input selection, response time settings, and picture modes are all accessible without digging through too many layers of nested menus. The response time modes label themselves by actual name: standard, fast, fastest, and the fastest setting does introduce the ghosting artifact that VA panels are known for. More on that in a minute. This monitor has a 1500R curvature. The 1500R curvature rating tells you the radius of the curve in millimeters, meaning if you extended the arc of this panel, it would form a complete circle with a radius of 1.5 meters, or about 59 inches. In practical terms, the curve is aggressive. More aggressive than the LG 38-inch monitor that I mentioned earlier, and much more aggressive than most curved gaming monitors that sit at 1800R or 1900R. For comparison, a flat 43-inch monitor sitting at arm's length puts the edges further away from your eyes than the center. Check out this awful characteristic of my horrendously expensive 43-inch monitors. Yes, at normal viewing distances, the view to the sides of the screen will have you looking at the LCD, but the distance from the LCD to the backlight diffuser is enough that you can't see the LCD illuminated. For the entire monitor, that's 40 square inches of screen that you can't see unless you move a couple feet to the left or the right. A curved monitor reduces this problem. An aggressively curved monitor reduces the problem even more. At 45 inches across on a 32:9 aspect ratio, the 1500R curve compensates for that, keeping the edges more equidistant from your eyes and reducing the feeling that you're watching two monitors badly glued together. Whether 1500R is too much depends entirely on viewing distance. At 2 to 3 feet, it feels natural. If you're sitting further back, say couch distance, it's gonna look like a Pringle. Clearly, this is a desk monitor and not a TV. Regarding color uniformity and gamut, Innocn claims 99% of sRGB coverage, and the included calibration report backs that up. Each unit ships with a printed report showing the measured color gamut and delta E values for the specific panel. Delta E values under 2 are generally considered imperceptible to the human eye, and the values on my report are under 2 across the board, which is not something most monitors at this price point even attempt to verify, let alone document per unit. In practice, colors are rich and consistent across most of the panel. VA panels can exhibit color shift at extreme viewing angles. If you're dead center and straight on, you won't notice it. But if you've got someone standing next to you trying to see your screen, they may notice it. That's a VA characteristic, not an Innocn specific problem. The per unit calibration report is worth pausing on for a moment. Most monitors ship with spec sheet numbers tested across a batch, representative of the panel type, and not your specific unit. Innocn is certifying that the individual panel in your box met the spec before it left the factory. That's meaningful if you're doing color-sensitive work, and it's a nice differentiator at this price tier. However, if you're a photography or video professional who needs display accurate color to a standard like DCP-I3, this is not the panel for you. The gamut tops out at sRGB, but for everything short of professional color grading, the factory calibration is solid and you're unlikely to feel the need to run your own calibration pass. I did try to use my spider calibrator on the display, but apparently it's not good for curved monitors. Peak brightness is rated at 450 nits, which is enough for a reasonably lit office environment. Certainly, it's good enough for my basement. In a sunlit room with windows behind you, you'll be running it closer to max. It's not an outdoor capable panel, but nothing at this size really is. Backlight uniformity is where VA panels and edge-lit displays sometimes struggle, and the 45C1R is not immune. Even with curved IPS monitors, I've not really seen the best backlight uniformity, so I don't know that this is really a VA-specific issue. However, the viewing angles, particularly in the vertical, are a VA thing. It's not great, so you'll want to make sure that your monitor height or the pitch angle result in a perpendicular viewing angle. If you run a dark visual theme, you're not as likely to notice the backlight uniformity. There is slight vignetting at the left and right edges, barely visible under color test images, effectively invisible at normal use. There's no significant clouding in the center, and for a 45-inch edge-lit VA at this price, the uniformity is better than I expected. But there's a note here. I'm assuming it's edge-lit because I didn't take it apart. Regarding the VA panel, VA stands for vertical alignment. The panels sit in between IPS and TN in the response speed conversation, but they win on contrast. The 45C1R is rated at 1 millisecond response time in its fastest mode, but that rating comes with an asterisk. VA panels can exhibit dark level smearing, sometimes called black smearing, where fast-moving objects on dark backgrounds leave a faint trailing artifact. It's not ghosting in the traditional sense, but it is a property of how VA panels handle transitions from dark states. At the standard response setting, it's barely noticeable. At fastest, you're trading some of that smearing for a slight overshoot artifact, the opposite problem, where trailing edges look brighter than they should for a frame. For productivity and content work, standard is the right setting and the one that I use. I usually buy IPS screens, so it's been interesting to use a VA panel. 120 Hz is good, especially as you move across a widescreen quickly. If you're a casual gamer, I would imagine this monitor is decent. I'm not really a gamer, but I did fire up City of Heroes and it was fine. The wide field of view is actually a bit disorienting, and for competitive gaming, this is not the panel you're going to shop for anyway. At 32:9 and 120 Hz, you already know what you signed up for. The payoff for accepting VA characteristics is the rated 3000:1 static contrast ratio, which is significantly better than IPS in the same price tier. Dark scenes look dark. This display is rated at Display HDR 400, which, if I'm being honest, is not really HDR at all. It's more or less just able to crank the backlight a bit more than a normal monitor. If you're serious about HDR, you should get an HDR 1000 display, which is more likely to be a TV with local dimming. For a monitor at this price, the port selection is genuinely generous. On the back, you get two HDMI 2.1 ports, one DisplayPort 1.4 port, one USB-C with 65-watt power delivery, two USB-A downstream ports, a USB-B upstream port, and an RJ45 Ethernet jack. Oh, and there's a 3.5mm audio out. There are built-in speakers, which are okay. Monitor speakers are generally not good, and the Innocn is no different in this regard. If you care about the quality of your sound, you should use powered speakers or headphones. DisplayPort 1.4 is the connection you want for full resolution at a full refresh rate. 5120 by 1440 at 120 Hz. HDMI 2.1 gets you there too, but only up to 60 Hz at this resolution on some configurations. If you've got a discrete GPU with a DisplayPort output, use it. The USB-C port is useful for single cable laptop connections. One cable handles video in, data through the USB hub, and 65 watts of charging back to your laptop. That's enough to run and charge most Ultrabooks and mid-range laptops. If you're on something like a MacBook Pro that wants 96 or 140 watts, it will charge, slowly, or only while the laptop is sleeping. Know your laptop's power budget before you assume it's a full docking solution. The Ethernet port is an interesting touch that I didn't expect at this price point. Connect Ethernet to the monitor, connect your laptop via USB-C, and your laptop gets wired network access through the monitor's hub. For a work from home laptop that lives on your desk, that sounds useful, sort of. I noticed something on the spec sheet, so I decided to test it out with one of my laptops. My Razer 13 is a 40 or 60 watt unit, and it ran fine with the single cable for power, video, the USB hub, and Ethernet. However, I do feel like it's kind of shocking that the Ethernet is a 10100 port in 2026. I'm not saying it's useless, but a 100 megabit per second LAN connection isn't very useful either. The USB B upstream port is there to enable the USB A hub when you're connected via HDMI or DisplayPort instead of USB C. Connect the included USB upstream cable from your PC to the monitor's USB B port, and the two USB A ports on the back become active. It's an extra cable, but it means that the hub works regardless of which video input you're using. I mentioned earlier that Windows 11 changed the Ultrawide calculus for me, and I want to be specific about why. On Windows 11, snapping a window to half the screen on a 32:9 display gave you half of a 32:9 display, which is a 16:9 pane, fine for some things, but it meant Windows' own snap logic wasn't really designed for how you'd actually want to use the space. With Windows 11 snap layouts, the grid that appears when you hover over a Windows Maximize button includes presets specifically useful on ultrawides. You can split the display into thirds, into asymmetric 2/3, 1/3, or into a 2x2 grid. It remembers your layout when you minimize and restore. It's not perfect, but it's legitimately better than anything Windows 10 offered natively, and it's good enough that I stopped reaching for power toys for most tasks. A 5120 by 1440, a 2/3, 1/3 split gives you a main working pane that's effectively a 34-inch widescreen monitor and a sidebar pane that's a 22-inch monitor. That's not a metaphor. That is approximately the physical screen area you're working with in each zone. And now we get to PBP, 2 computers, 1 screen. This is where it gets interesting for the work from home crowd and the Homelab crowd. The 45C1R supports picture-by-picture mode, which takes 2 separate input sources and displays them simultaneously split down the middle. Left half from HDMI 1, right half from DisplayPort. Or left half from your personal PC on USB-C and right half from your work laptop on HDMI. Each half of the screen in PBP mode is 2560 by 1440, which is a full QHD display, at 27 inches diagonal of physical screen area. That is a decent monitor by itself. You're getting 2 of them, hardware split with no software tricks and no virtual display nonsense. If you're using a couple Windows machines like a work laptop and a personal desktop, you could make it a really interesting setup with mouse without borders. For my situation, a bench laptop on USB-C and an SBC or server on HDMI, this is the feature that turned a nice monitor into something actually useful. My LG 43s could turn into 41080p displays, but I think it's ergonomically easier to just go too wide. Beyond that, the USB hub with KVM-like behavior is relevant here too. With the USB upstream cable connected to one machine and the USB-C connected to another, you can switch which machine controls the shared USB peripherals. Keyboard, mouse, whatever you've plugged into the USB-A ports, through the OSD. It's not a full hardware KVM with hotkey switching, but it's functional for a sitting at a desk workflow where you're toggling between a personal machine and a work laptop. I will say that not having a remote, like I have with my LG 43s, makes PBP much more tedious, especially since the functions are 2 levels deep in the OSD. So what's the verdict? At the $699.99 list price, this monitor is competitive, but you'd want to think about it. At $599 with Prime Next Day delivery, it's a genuinely easy recommendation for the right buyer. But who is the right buyer? Well, I think it's someone who is primarily doing productivity work. Coding, writing, spreadsheets, maybe video editing, multi-app juggling on a single monitor setup. Someone who has outgrown the 2 monitors side-by-side configuration, or who is running a laptop as their primary machine and wants a real docking experience. Maybe someone who came up in the era of multiple large monitors and wants that screen real estate but without the cables. I think the PBP mode is the real point of interest for many of the people who like my channel. Running your work and home workstations on a single monitor with mouse without borders, or possibly using this monitor with my use case as a Homelab monitor. I have a small form factor machine at my computer workbench, which I can use in PBP mode with whatever computer or SBC I'm playing with. Who it's not for: competitive gamers who need sub 5 millisecond response and 240 hertz, a color critical print or photography professional who needs a wide gamut DCI P3 display, or someone who sits more than 4 feet from their desk. The 1500R curve will start to look weird at that distance. Innocn did a lot right with this monitor. The contrast ratio, the port selection, the PBP implementation, and the build quality are among the things that typically cost you more from competing brands. The things that are just okay: the VA dark smearing at max response, the display HDR 400 ceiling, and the 65 watt PD limit. These are the known trade-offs for this panel type and for the price tier. They're not surprises. The speakers, however, are pretty dreadful. However, for $599 delivered tomorrow, if you've been staring at two monitors separated by a bezel seam and you're tired of it, this is a pretty compelling way to fix that. And that's all I have to say about the Innocn 45C1R. Since I'm getting close to 100,000 subscribers, I wanted to build out a workbench that would be suitable for going on camera, and Innocn was kind enough to provide the 45C1R for the project. They didn't pay me anything, and they didn't tell me what I should and shouldn't say about their product. If you found this useful, hit like and subscribe, and if you know anyone that needs a really, really wide monitor, feel free to share this with them. If you've got your own 32:9 setup of your own, or you tried one and sent it back, I'd genuinely like to hear about it in the comments below. Links in the description. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.